Willow's fall, a tragic spiral at Carly's doorstep sends Port Charles reeling ***. The walls that once held Willow steady began to crack the moment her wedding to Drew collapsed. In the aftermath, what should have been a day of joy transformed into a chaotic spiral of heartbreak, desperation, and public unraveling. Dressed in a now-wrinkled wedding gown with mascara streaking her cheeks like battle scars, Willow burst into Carly's home in complete disarray, the haunting sound of her son Wiley's voice drawing her deeper into the emotional abyss. She didn't knock. She didn't pause. She ran, propelled by panic and the raw instinct of a mother desperate to touch what she feared was slipping beyond reach. But her arrival wasn't met with open arms, it was met with alarm. Carly, always composed in the eye of emotional storms, confronted a daughter-in-law she barely recognized. Willow's makeup, smeared from tears and madness, her voice trembling and manic, seemed a far cry from the gentle woman Carly once knew. Carly tried to ground her, literally forcing her to look in the mirror, to face herself in this state. A sobering reflection stared back, frightening even to Willow, but not enough to deter her drive to reach her child. Carly, protective of the children inside, urged her to retreat before scaring Wiley and Amelia. But the damage was already rippling outward. Michael walked in and was immediately caught between heartbreak and resolve. His instinct to shield Wiley from this emotional hurricane overpowered any remnants of compassion. Willow clung to hope, insisting that since she hadn't married Drew, she should now be allowed back into her children's lives. It wasn't just about legalities. It was her last grasp at meaning, her last thread of sanity. Michael, with the steel of a man worn down by betrayal and loss, stood firm. "You're not dating Wiley," he said, coldly reminding her of the judge's ruling. His words sliced through her resolve, yet ignited a final plea. Willow offered to reunite with him, to rebuild their broken family, if only she could be with the children again. But Michael was unmoved. The lines between empathy and responsibility had long been blurred for him, and now he chose to uphold the court's order, threatening to call security if she didn't leave. Crumbling under the weight of rejection and heartbreak, Willow sank to the ground, her sobs muffled only by the glass between her and the image of Wiley peering from a window. Her fingertips pressed to the glass as if the distance could be closed by will alone. But it remained unbreachable. It was Elizabeth Baldwin and Rick Lansing who found her moments later, curled on the porch like a forgotten remnant of a broken promise. Rick was uncomfortable, visibly shaken by the scene, but Elizabeth, whose own past carried echoes of unraveling, gently pulled Willow from the cold stone steps. With no home left to return to, no husband, no children, no center to orbit, Willow accepted Elizabeth's offer to stay at her house. She said little, but her silence was unnervingly calm. As though she had crossed a threshold of despair so deep that her pain had quieted into strategy. She whispered, almost to herself, that if she aligned with Michael's decisions, if she showed him she was no longer fighting him, he would eventually allow her to return to the children's lives. Meanwhile, Michael and Carly tried to steady Wiley's questions. The boy had heard everything. The fear in his voice as he asked if his mother was in trouble sent shivers through Michael's core. Carly, ever the buffer, soothed him with gentle half-truths, saying Willow was only upset that the wedding didn't happen as planned. But Wiley's intuition was sharper than they expected. He worried aloud about the judge and whether Mommy would be punished for coming. Michael tried to brush it off, but even he couldn't ignore the consequences of Willow's breakdown, nor the haunting image of her outside his home, pleading to be let in. Later, with Wiley and Amelia tucked away, Michael confided in Carly about the true chaos that had unraveled the wedding. Nina and Drew, two people who should have come forward with the truth, had remained silent for far too long. Carly's face went pale with fury and horror as she digested how deeply Nina's silence had poisoned everything. A wedding destroyed, a mother shattered, and now a child burdened with questions he should never have to ask. Carly had always warned that secrets had a way of detonating at the worst possible moment, and now they were wading through the fallout. Michael was torn, though his words said otherwise. He insisted he would follow the court's ruling. But his eyes betrayed him. Every time he thought of Willow, he hesitated. The woman he once loved had transformed into someone unrecognizable, driven by sorrow, desperation, and perhaps something more fragile, guilt. The line between protecting his children and pushing away their mother was razor thin, and Michael was beginning to feel the sharp sting of its edge. Across town, at Alexis Davis's house, a different emotional current stirred. Molly Lansing Davis arrived with a storm of her own, slamming Cody's name into the conversation with such force that Alexis could hardly catch her breath. According to Molly, Christina had been right all along. Cody was reckless, immature, and completely unsuitable for anything resembling professional respect or creative collaboration. After officially severing ties with him, Molly had redirected her energy into a new manuscript, refashioning Cody's once heroic character into a caricature, the goofy sidekick of her novel. It was petty, but it was honest. Alexis, too exhausted by her own emotional weight, merely nodded, offering little more than vague support. But the tension between the sisters, the judgment that had long been brewing, was bound to escalate. Christina had her own motivations, and as history has shown, her emotional sabotage rarely comes without collateral damage. What began as subtle undermining could spiral, especially if Willow's breakdown becomes public knowledge. There was already too much instability in the Davis family, too much noise and too many unspoken truths. Back at Elizabeth's home, Willow sat in silence, her hands wrapped tightly around a warm mug she hadn't touched. Elizabeth watched her cautiously, sensing that beneath her calm demeanor was something jagged and unpredictable. Willow wasn't healing, she was waiting. Waiting for Michael to come, to change his mind, to see the mother of his children instead of the woman who had imploded at his doorstep. But what if he didn't come? What if the silence stretched on and became the new normal? Would Willow accept her exile, or would she descend further into desperation, convinced that love, when lost, could be clawed back through sacrifice? Port Charles was no stranger to collapses. Emotional, moral, legal, it had seen its fair share. But few unravelings had cut this deep. Willow, once the picture of grace and maternal devotion, now stood on the edge of psychological ruin. Michael, wrestling with duty and residual love, had drawn a line he might soon regret. Carly, though stoic, could feel the ripples threatening to pull everything apart. And Wiley, innocent, watching, absorbing, would not remain unscarred. What comes next is unclear. Will Michael's conviction harden, or will the memory of Willow's outstretched hand haunt him into reconsideration? Will Carly continue to shield her son's decisions, or will she remind him that forgiveness often looks like risk? And Willow, silent, waiting, calculating, may not remain passive much longer. Desperation can be the mother of reinvention, or it can be the spark that ignites destruction. One thing is certain, the story is far from over. Stay tuned.